The invisible pattern. There's a strange sense of déjà vu in life that most of us rarely stop to question. You meet someone new, perhaps a friend, a lover, or a colleague, and yet, almost immediately, something feels familiar, not in the superficial sense of shared interests or mutual friends, but in a deeper, almost unexplainable way. The energy they carry, the patterns in their behavior, the way they challenge or soothe you, it echoes someone you've known before, and soon, it happens again and again. It's unsettling. A romantic partner who mirrors the insecurities or betrayals of someone from your past. A friend who triggers the same frustration or disappointment you've felt countless times before. A co-worker whose ambitions, manipulations, or quiet competitiveness feel all too familiar, as if history is repeating itself, but with different faces. You start to wonder, is this coincidence, or is something more profound at work? Perhaps deep down, you already suspect the answer. There's a pattern here, a hidden rhythm in human connection that most people ignore, dismiss, or simply fail to recognize. It's subtle, almost invisible, until it becomes undeniable. The universe, or maybe your own mind, seems to be orchestrating a series of encounters that mirror each other, forcing you to confront the same lessons, the same challenges over and over again. We all have our stories. The friend who betrays you just when you needed loyalty. The lover who ignites a familiar storm of doubt and longing. The colleague who stirs insecurities you thought you had left behind. And every time the emotional impact is the same: frustration, heartache, or even fear. Yet in this repetition, there is a message, a reflection of something within yourself, something in the world around you, or perhaps both. The question we are about to explore is deceptively simple. Why do these archetypes keep appearing in our lives, often under new disguises, yet leaving the same imprint on our hearts and minds? Is it fate, a hidden design in human behavior, or the subtle workings of society and psychology that shape the people we attract? By the end of this journey, what will become clear is that these patterns are neither random nor meaningless. They are a mirror reflecting both our inner landscape and the larger forces that govern human connection. And as we begin to peel back the layers of repetition, a quiet, almost unsettling truth emerges. The people we meet are teaching us, challenging us, and, in ways we rarely recognize, shaping the trajectory of our own lives. Historical shadows, archetypes, across time. Long before modern psychology gave us names for archetypes, human history was already telling the same story. Across centuries and civilizations, certain patterns of behavior, personality, and interaction have repeated themselves with remarkable consistency. In the myths of ancient Greece, the trickster deceives, the tyrant rules with fear, the loyal friend sacrifices themselves. In the epics of India, the same archetypes reappear, weaving through generations of kings, warriors, and sages. Even in the annals of recorded history, we see them again. Manipulators rising to power, charismatic leaders inspiring devotion and betrayal, ordinary people repeating acts of cruelty or compassion in ways that feel eerily familiar. Carl Jung called these patterns archetypes, a collective unconscious, a shared psychic structure that exists across time and culture. But even before Jung put a name to them, humans recognize their presence intuitively. Ancient storytellers captured the essence of human behavior through recurring figures, teaching communities to recognize the dangers and virtues of these roles long before modern psychology could explain why. Take, for example, the tyrant archetype. In ancient Rome, leaders like Nero embodied traits of control, manipulation, and indulgence that echoed patterns we can see today in CEOs, politicians, and influencers who wield power through fear or spectacle. The betrayer archetype is equally timeless. From Judas in the Bible to the spies and turncoats of feudal Europe, betrayal is never an isolated incident. It is a recurring human motif, a role that history insists we recognize. Even the archetype of the savior, the mentor, or the healer repeats itself endlessly, reminding us that not all recurring figures are destructive. Some exist to challenge, guide, or transform. But why do these archetypes recur? Part of the answer lies in the cyclical nature of human society. Structures of power, love, and community have always been built on relationships, dependencies, and hierarchies. Within these frameworks, certain behaviors naturally emerge over and over. A ruler who craves control, a confidant who betrays trust, a lover who repeats patterns of attachment. All are products not only of individual psychology, but of societal roles that have existed for millennia. Yet there is also a subtler, more personal layer. These archetypes are not just historical or cultural phenomena. They are mirrors reflecting parts of ourselves. When we encounter a tyrant, a betrayer, or a savior in our own lives, we are meeting not only their external traits, but the internal echoes of our own unresolved conflicts, fears, or desires. The patterns we recognize in history are the same patterns that resonate within our personal relationships, as if the past is quietly replaying itself in our present. History, then, is not just a collection of events. It is a lens through which we can perceive the repetition of human behavior. By tracing the shadows of archetypes across time, we begin to understand that what feels like coincidence or fate is often a reflection of deeply ingrained structures, both in society and within ourselves. The people who repeatedly appear in our lives are not random. They are participants in a much older, much larger story, one that stretches across generations and civilizations, a story that asks us to see patterns, to recognize roles, and perhaps to learn from them. As we move forward, the question shifts from "why does this keep happening to me?" to "what can these patterns teach me?" History provides the context, but psychology and self-awareness will reveal the meaning. And in that revelation lies the first step toward breaking the cycle, or understanding it so deeply that it no longer controls us. The psychology of repetition. If history shows us the archetypes that repeat across time, psychology reveals why they repeat in our personal lives. The patterns that haunt us, those familiar friends, lovers, colleagues, and rivals, are not mere coincidence. They are a reflection of the mind, of deeply ingrained mechanisms that shape who we attract and who we allow into our inner world. At the heart of this repetition lies the principle of projection. We unconsciously assign parts of ourselves, our fears, desires, unresolved trauma, onto others. The manipulative partner, the critical friend, the overbearing boss. These figures often mirror traits we either reject or deny in ourselves. Their presence in our lives forces a confrontation with our own inner world, whether we are ready for it or not. The irony is profound. We are drawn to people who challenge us in ways that reveal our blind spots, yet we rarely recognize this until the patterns have repeated multiple times. Closely tied tied to projection is the phenomenon of transference, first observed in the study of psychoanalysis. We carry emotions and expectations from past relationships into the present, sometimes projecting unresolved parental conflicts onto romantic partners, or the lessons of a past friendship onto a new colleague. The result is that the same dynamics play out repeatedly, each encounter feeling fresh on the surface, yet fundamentally familiar underneath. It is as if the mind is rehearsing old scripts, inviting us to finally learn the lesson we ignored the first time. Attachment theory adds another layer. Childhood experiences shape how we relate to others as adults, establishing patterns that can persist for decades. The avoidant partner who retreats emotionally, the anxious friend who demands constant reassurance, the controlling co-worker who triggers defensiveness. All of these archetypes resonate with our learned attachment styles. Without awareness, we find ourselves magnetically drawn to people who reinforce these early patterns, often mistaking repetition for fate rather than a reflection of conditioning. Our brains also crave familiarity. Confirmation bias ensures that we notice and remember interactions that fit our expectations, reinforcing the sense that history is repeating itself. We seek what is emotionally familiar, even when it is uncomfortable or destructive, because the mind prioritizes predictability over uncertainty. This is why toxic relationships can feel strangely right, and why patterns of betrayal, disappointment, or conflict continue to appear in new forms. Yet there is another deeper dimension, the shadow self, a concept Carl Jung described as the hidden, often uncomfortable aspects of our psyche. The people who repeatedly appear in our lives act as mirrors for these shadow elements. They provoke, irritate, and challenge us precisely because they reflect parts of ourselves we refuse to see. Only by confronting this shadow can we break the cycle, transforming repetition from torment into insight. Cinematic examples could be endless. The ex who mirrors unresolved issues with a parent, the co-worker whose ambition exposes our own insecurities, the friend whose betrayal forces a confrontation with our own boundaries. Each encounter is a psychological echo, a chance to recognize the patterns that govern our choices, the unspoken rules of attraction and repulsion, and the subtle forces that shape our emotional lives. In understanding the psychology of repetition, a paradox emerges. The people who frustrate, hurt, or challenge us are not enemies of our growth. They are guides. They show us the unresolved threads we carry, the blind spots we must illuminate. And while the repetition may feel cruel, it is neither random nor meaningless. It is a mirror, a teacher, and an invitation to step into awareness, to see the hidden mechanisms of the mind that orchestrate the seemingly endless cycle of familiar faces in unfamiliar bodies. Society's invisible hand, culture, power, and repetition patterns in our personal lives are not solely the product of individual psychology. They are amplified and shaped by the invisible forces of society. Culture, power structures, and social conditioning act as silent architects, subtly influencing the people we encounter and the roles they play. The archetypes we meet, whether the manipulator, the savior, the betrayer, or the authority figure, are not isolated phenomena. They are reflections of broader systems that have existed for centuries, systems that continue to repeat themselves in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. From the moment we are born, society begins to shape the patterns we internalize. Families teach us what is acceptable, desirable, or feared in others, conditioning us to respond to certain traits in predictable ways. Schools reinforce hierarchies and competition, rewarding conformity while subtly rewarding manipulation or charm. Media and culture bombard us with archetypal narratives: the charismatic hero, the villainous antagonist, the loyal friend, the tragic lover, training us to recognize, anticipate, and unconsciously seek these roles in our own relationships. The result is that we are rarely encountering people at random. We are engaging with a curated reflection of the world society has taught us to inhabit. Power dynamics add another layer of repetition. Throughout history, societies have structured themselves around hierarchies of control, authority, and influence. Within these structures, certain personality types are privileged and reproduced. Leaders manipulate, enforcers maintain control, followers obey or resist. In modern life, these dynamics continue in the office, in politics, and even in social circles. The coworker who triggers familiar tension, the friend who oversteps boundaries, the romantic partner who seeks dominance. They are not merely individuals, they are living embodiments of societal patterns that have persisted across centuries. Even subtle cultural reinforcement shapes whom we attract and whom we tolerate. Society often rewards drama, loyalty, and conflict in predictable ways. Media glorifies the manipulative hero or the tragic lover, subtly suggesting that these patterns are not only normal but desirable. Social networks, online communities, and cultural narratives act as echo chambers, reinforcing the same dynamics again and again, ensuring that the people who appear in our lives fit these archetypal molds. Historical echoes are everywhere. Consider the rise and fall of leaders throughout centuries, the recurring cycles of betrayal and ambition, the patterns of oppression and revolt. These societal patterns mirror the microcosm of our personal relationships. The boss who repeats the manipulative strategies of a centuries-old ruler, the partner who echoes the jealousies of historical figures, even the friend who enacts the same role as an archetypal confidant or betrayer. They are all part of this continuum. Society has constructed templates, and unconsciously we gravitate toward them. The unsettling truth is that these patterns often feel like fate because society has trained us to recognize, repeat, and reinforce them. We encounter familiar personalities not merely because of our psychology, but because we inhabit a world that perpetuates archetypal roles, rewards certain behaviors, and punishes deviation. Every repeated betrayal, every familiar charm, every echo of a past conflict is both a personal mirror and a societal imprint, demonstrating how deeply interconnected our individual lives are with the invisible currents of culture and power. Understanding this dimension reframes the question. The repetition of people in our lives is not just a personal puzzle, it is a reflection of the societal framework in which we exist. The patterns are teaching us to recognize forces beyond the self, to see the invisible hands that shape human behavior, and to question the roles we unconsciously accept. The people we meet are not merely characters in our personal story. They are actors in a much larger narrative, one written by centuries of societal conditioning, hierarchy, and collective expectation. Recognizing your recurring patterns. If patterns in our lives are shaped by both psychology and society, the next step is awareness. Recognition is the key. Before we can break free from repetition, we must first see it clearly. This is the moment when the abstract becomes tangible, when the familiar Faces that have haunted our lives begin to reveal their hidden logic. The first step is reflection. Observe your relationships, romantic, professional, or platonic, not just for the surface-level drama, but for recurring behaviors and emotional responses. Are there traits that keep appearing? Betrayal, manipulation, dependence, control, or charm? Does a particular type of energy repeatedly trigger anxiety, irritation, or longing? Journaling, meditative reflection, or simply taking note of patterns in real time can illuminate the subtle echoes that have gone unnoticed for years. Next comes the recognition of archetypes. While no person can be reduced to a single role, naming the recurring patterns in your life can provide clarity. Who is the saboteur, the rescuer, the tyrant, or the mentor in your life? When you identify these recurring roles, you begin to separate the individual from the pattern. The coworker who mirrors a past manipulator is no longer a random tormentor. They are a reflection of a pattern your mind recognizes. The romantic partner who repeats familiar mistakes is no longer a cruel coincidence. They are an echo of unresolved issues demanding attention. Equally important is self-accountability. Recognizing patterns is not about blaming others. It is about understanding your own participation in the cycle. What behaviors, fears, or desires are drawing these archetypes into your life? Perhaps you unconsciously tolerate betrayal because of past conditioning, or you are drawn to dominance because it mirrors unresolved childhood dynamics. The people who repeat in your life are not villains in isolation. They are co-creators of a dynamic that has existed for years, sometimes decades. Awareness of your own tendencies is the first step toward reclaiming agency. Cinematic examples could be as simple as noticing how a friend always mirrors a sibling's behavior, or how a romantic interest seems to replay your first heartbreak in a new disguise. These moments, once observed with clarity, shift from frustration to insight. Patterns stop being invisible forces that trap us. They become teachers, signaling the areas of life and psyche that need attention, healing, or conscious intervention. This stage of recognition also reframes perspective. Instead of asking, "Why does this keep happening to me?" the question evolves into, "What is this pattern trying to teach me?" The same energy that once provoked confusion or pain now becomes a guide, illuminating blind spots and unexamined motivations. It is a subtle, almost unsettling process because it forces you to confront truths that are easier to ignore. But the reward is profound: clarity, empowerment, and the ability to act rather than react. Ultimately, recognizing recurring patterns transforms repetition from a cycle of frustration into a roadmap for growth. The people who appear in your life are no longer simply characters. They are messengers, reflections, and mirrors. By learning to identify these archetypes, to understand the interplay between your psychology and society, and to confront your own contributions to the cycle, you step into awareness. And in that awareness lies the potential for true liberation from patterns, from repetition, and from the invisible forces that have quietly guided your life for far too long. Breaking the cycle. Transformation and choice. Recognition of recurring patterns is only the beginning. Awareness without action is like seeing a storm on the horizon but remaining on the shore, powerless to move. To truly break free from repetition, we must confront the forces, both internal and external, that keep these cycles alive. Transformation begins with choice, and choice begins with understanding the subtle mechanics of our own behavior. The first step is shadow work, a concept articulated by Carl Jung. Our shadow is the hidden, often uncomfortable part of ourselves, the fears, desires, and impulses we refuse to acknowledge. The people who repeatedly appear in our lives are mirrors of this shadow. They provoke, irritate, and challenge us precisely because they reflect parts of ourselves we have denied. Facing the shadow is not easy. It requires honesty, courage, and a willingness to feel discomfort. But in that confrontation lies liberation. When we acknowledge our own role in attracting certain archetypes, we reclaim power over the patterns that have long controlled us. Next comes conscious selection. Awareness allows us to choose who we let into our lives intentionally. It is not about isolation or avoidance. It is about alignment. Once we understand the archetypes we have repeatedly encountered, we can make deliberate decisions: which energies to engage, which behaviors to accept, and which dynamics to reject. The lover who triggers old insecurities no longer has the unconscious hold over us. The friend who mirrors a toxic past no longer dictates our emotional landscape. Choice transforms the repetitive into the intentional. Behavioral reprogramming reinforces this process. Our brains are wired for repetition, but neuroplasticity ensures that we can unlearn old habits and create new responses. When faced with familiar archetypes, we can consciously respond rather than react. We can recognize manipulation without internalizing it, confront betrayal without recreating self-doubt, and engage with ambition without surrendering our boundaries. Each decision, each deliberate action, weakens the gravitational pull of the repeating pattern. Yet transformation is not merely tactical, it is also philosophical. Acceptance of the cycle as a teacher allows us to extract meaning from repetition without being enslaved by it. The patterns in our lives are not punishment, they are opportunities. Each recurrence is a mirror reflecting lessons we have yet to fully integrate. A message disguised as challenge, a map of unresolved internal and social dynamics. By embracing this perspective, we shift from victimhood to agency, from frustration to insight. Cinematic examples underscore this journey. A person finally confronting a partner who mirrors past pain, setting boundaries with unwavering clarity. A professional refusing to be drawn into the same manipulative dynamics that dominated previous workplaces. A friend choosing to step away from toxic loyalty, reclaiming emotional energy that was previously surrendered unconsciously. In each instance, transformation is not instant. It is a process, a deliberate reorientation of attention, behavior, and perception. Ultimately, breaking the cycle is not about eliminating repetition entirely. Life will continue to present familiar challenges, but about changing our relationship to repetition. We move from being trapped in the patterns to being guided by them, using each encounter as a tool for insight and growth. Transformation occurs when awareness, choice, and action converge. The power lies not in controlling others, but in mastering the forces within ourselves that have long dictated who we meet, how we respond, and how we allow our lives to unfold. By taking these steps, repetition becomes not a source of despair, but a source of liberation. We learn to navigate the labyrinth of human interaction with clarity, purpose, and discernment. And in doing so, we discover that the very patterns that once haunted us are also the instruments through which we achieve the deepest understanding of ourselves and the world around us. The mirror of life, patterns as teachers. By now, it becomes clear that the recurring people in our lives are more than mere coincidence. They are mirrors. Each familiar archetype reflects a part of ourselves, a hidden truth, or an unresolved lesson we have been avoiding. The repetition that once felt like a curse slowly reveals itself as a teacher, guiding us toward self-understanding and deeper insight. Consider the betrayer, whose actions sting with familiarity. At first, their repetition evokes anger, pain, or confusion. Yet upon reflection, it becomes apparent that the pattern is not only about them, it is about how we tolerate betrayal, how we may unconsciously invite it, and what we have yet to confront within ourselves. Similarly, the manipulator who reappears in successive friendships or workplaces highlights the ways we navigate control and influence, testing our boundaries and our willingness to assert agency. Each recurrence, each familiar face in a new body is an invitation to look inward. Patterns are also mirrors of society. The archetypes we encounter are shaped by cultural expectations, social hierarchies, and historical forces. The same forms of dominance, ambition, or conformity that existed centuries ago echo in modern relationships, subtly influencing our choices and interactions. By observing these patterns, we gain not only self-awareness, but also a deeper understanding of the collective human experience. We begin to see that repetition is not punishment. It is a reflection of the structures, both internal and external, that shape human behavior. The philosophical lesson is profound. Life does not repeat itself to trap us. It repeats itself to teach us. Each archetype is a signal, a reflection of what remains unresolved, unlearned, or unintegrated. Awareness transforms repetition into wisdom. We stop seeing people as villains, victims, or obstacles, and start seeing them as instruments for insight. The anger, frustration, or longing they evoke becomes data for reflection, a tool for understanding the self and the patterns of the world around us. This perspective shifts the relationship we have with life's recurring challenges. Instead of asking, "Why does this happen to me?" we begin to ask, "What is this revealing?" Every repeated encounter, every echo of the past, is an opportunity to confront our blind spots, refine our understanding, and cultivate mastery over our choices. Recognition turns repetition into instruction, frustration into clarity, and challenge into growth. Ultimately, the mirror of life teaches a singular truth. The people who keep appearing are not there to harm us. They are there to illuminate the unseen, to expose patterns we must understand if we are to navigate life with awareness. Repetition ceases to be a source of despair. It becomes a compass pointing toward deeper self-knowledge, resilience, and the capacity to break free from cycles that once held us captive. In this mirror, the lessons are unmistakable, and the path forward is clear, but only if we choose to look. Conclusion: the power of conscious encounters. As our journey comes to an end, one truth becomes unavoidable. The people who appear repeatedly in our lives are not accidents, and the patterns they embody are not meaningless. Every encounter, every familiar archetype, in a new guise, is a reflection of forces that operate on multiple levels: psychological, societal, and historical. Life has been offering these repetitions not as punishment but as invitations to awareness, to growth, and to conscious choice. The power lies in recognition. Once we see the patterns, once we understand the archetypes that populate our personal and social spheres, we can respond rather than react. The lover who mirrors past insecurities, the friend who tests our boundaries, the colleague who repeats old dynamics, they no longer hold unconscious sway over us. Each interaction becomes a deliberate engagement, an opportunity to exercise discernment, self-awareness, and agency. We move from being participants in a cycle to being architects of our own experiences. Transformation is both internal and external. Internally, we confront our shadows, our projections, and the unresolved patterns within ourselves. Externally, we make conscious choices about whom we allow into our lives and how we interact with them. We choose boundaries, alignment, and engagement with intention rather than falling victim to the gravitational pull of familiarity and repetition. The same patterns that once brought frustration or heartbreak now serve as instruments of empowerment. But the lesson extends beyond the individual. By observing and understanding these archetypal patterns, we gain insight into the invisible forces that shape human behavior at large. Societal norms, cultural conditioning, and historical repetition all echo within our personal experiences. The people we encounter are not only mirrors of ourselves, they are reflections of the larger social and historical currents in which we live. Recognizing this duality, personal and collective, offers a profound perspective on both the self and the world. Ultimately, life's recurring archetypes are teachers disguised as challenges. They are there to illuminate our blind spots, test our boundaries, and guide us toward self-mastery. The choice is ours to remain unconscious, repeating the same dynamics endlessly, or to engage with awareness, using each encounter as a tool for insight and growth. Conscious encounters transform repetition into understanding, struggle into clarity, and uncertainty into agency. As we step away from this exploration, one principle remains. The people we meet are never entirely who they appear to be, and yet they are exactly what we need to see. Each repetition is a mirror, each pattern a guide, and each encounter a test of our awareness. In recognizing this, we reclaim the power that has always been ours, the power to observe, understand, and choose. To meet life consciously is to meet it fully, without fear, without illusion, and with a clarity that allows us to navigate its complexities with both wisdom and courage.